Hey everybody, this is Brad from Johnson Small Engines, better known as One-Handed Mechanic. If I can do it, you can too. Today we are working on a Craftsman LT1000, and this came in, it actually stopped while he was using it, and the engine just quit. So this is a 17 horsepower overhead valves, single cylinder Briggs and Stratton, a lot of them are Intech engines. These engines have been around for a long time, and if your engine just stops in the middle of a mow, the first thing you want to check is obviously check your oil to make sure your oil level is on the mark. And then I do the quick and easy test, which is turn your engine over by hand. And if this flywheel just spins freely, now this will get to the point where it gets hard again, like right there, that's your compression stroke. And it takes a little bit to get past that stroke. Then you know at least you have compression. It'll be easy, and then it gets hard. Now, if it just spins freely and it just keeps spinning freely, well, then you blew it up, probably have low oil. That's a whole different scenario. Then I would check if you have the gas tank up front here like this one does. Back in the day, they had lots of problems with these fuel cap vents getting clogged, and if you had a full tank of gas, the engine would only run for a few minutes, and then it would shut down because there was no air getting into the tank, so that would mean you would get no flow to the carburetor and eventually would shut the machine down. You come back to it 10 minutes later, and it would run for another 10 minutes and shut down. This isn't the case with this one. This one basically, I have a few how to diagnose a Briggs and Stratton engine that doesn't run, so I'll put them all in the link in the description below, but this is basically a bad ignition coil, and I'm going to show you how to put one in. Okay, so the parts we need from left to right, we have the ignition coil, and they have changed. Briggs is now going to a metal outside cover. The part number for this 17.5 horsepower engine is a 595304. I'm going to put I always suggest putting a new spark plug in when you do an ignition coil. I'm going to use it's equivalent to a Champion. Most of them that come in those single cylinder engines are RC12YC from Champion. I'm going to put a CS6 in. I buy these in bulk, and NGK product. I just like NGK. This is the model type in the code and I'll show you where to find it on the engine. It's on the valve cover. This one you can see model type and code. It was cleaned off, but they should be stamped on pretty much every single cylinder Briggs and Stratton engine. The real new ones may not have it like that anymore, but pretty much all the ones that I've ever worked on, as far as I know, they have them on the valve cover. This 17.5 horsepower Briggs and Stratton engine, the model's here, the type is here. These are the two numbers that you're gonna need to look up the correct ignition coil if needed. And then the code, the nice thing about the code is the first two digits of the code tell you the year of the engine. So this engine was made in 2002. So this is actually a 22-year-old engine. And right here is the coil gap. I use a piece of plastic you're gonna actually have to gap the coil, and between 10 and 12 thousandths is about the norm. And I think I have this written down correctly, so it should be 0.25 millimeter to 0.30 millimeter, if that's correct. We have a 5/8 spark plug socket for the spark plug. I'm just going to use this is a extension for the spark plug, getting the spark plug off. Forgot this guy. That's reminding me of the spark plug. This is just my clip tool remover, but it's great for taking the boot off the spark plug when you pop it off the spark plug, so you don't ruin the end of sometimes the end of the spark plug wire will sit on the spark plug and you can't get it off. A spark tester, there are many different kinds of spark testers out there. This is an inline spark tester. I've been using it for years. You guys can use whatever spark tester you get a hold of. 3/8 socket, 5/16 socket, also a 5/16 nut driver can help you. And this is, if you're going to gap and you have feeler gauges, you can use feeler gauges to do the gap armature, the armature gap, but it's a little hard to do with feeler gauges. I just found out if you can just get something close. This is a piece of plastic I've had for years. You do need to find a way to measure it though, for like a mic. And I'm going to use my quarter-inch electric ratchet, which I use all the time. So let's get started. So I'm going to take the hood off, and we're going to pull the boot on the spark plug. Okay, so I use my handy little clip tool right here. Now, the reason why I use this on these spark plug boots is because these spark plug boots can get they get stuck on the spark plug, and it's real hard to get the spark plug out. So if you just put your tool right here and just pry back on the boot itself, it'll actually pop off. There's a little metal tab inside there. Okay, it's hard to see that, but that metal tab sometimes it will get stuck on the end of your spark plug, and then you can't get what'll happen is you'll yank it and it'll get stuck on there, and then you're trying to fix the repair of this, even though we're replacing this, but if you're not, that tool helps out just to taking this off, which is nice to have. I'm gonna put my inline spark tester on it. Just clip it in there. I'm gonna go right to the spark plug boot itself. And you do have to be careful with your muffler right here, and you wanna make sure that you're not gonna be grounding out anything. All right, so this should glow if we have spark. Okay, as you can see, we have no spark. So the next thing I want to do is, before you go ahead and open it up, you can take your spark plug out and make sure your spark plug has not failed. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 5/8. I use a spark plug socket, and a 5/8 socket, deep socket will work, and I'm using an extension on this just to help me out. Okay, so I'm looking at it. It looks like it's actually wet, which means that we probably have fuel, but we have no ignition. So let's just look at this. Okay, this is an NGK. This is one of my NGKs. This machine has been in here before, and they're pretty good. So we're gonna go ahead and put a brand new NGK in there, and that's pre-gapped at 30 thousandths, but you should definitely check if you use a Champion spark plug, which most people do, it's 30 thousandths gap. You wanna make sure it's gapped correctly. And then I just crank it in until I feel it crush the washer on the edge of there's a crush washer on the spark plug. I don't go with torque, I just go with feel, and you just basically crank it in until you feel the washer, and then give it a little bit more of a crank, make sure it's tight, but not too tight. Then I'm gonna go ahead and throw the spark tester back on it again. This will confirm that we either have a bad spark plug or a bad ignition coil. Okay. So we still have no spark, so that's going to rule that out, but I'm going to leave that in there because we put a new spark plug in. Now this is where, okay, so I did miss, this is actually, it should have been, a lot of these are 3/8 bolts right here. We have to take this cover off. These are actually Torx head right here, and it's a 45, number 45 Torx. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and loosen these. Most of the time, they'll have a little air gap right here, so you don't have to, it'll be underneath here. You can look and see if there's a little air gap. If there's a little air gap there, that means you don't have to take the bolts all the way out. And then on the other side, and then we have a 3/8 socket size head bolt right here. And again on the side over here. Now, you take the air filter out. First, take the air filter cover off. Now, you may have a 1/4 inch screw right in there. This one does not, but I'm going to go ahead and take the air filter out, just because we're taking this all apart. Now, this should just come up and over. Now, granted, when it's down on a carburetor right here, there's an O-ring, so it's going to feel a little tight right there. Just going to pull this up. The ignition coil is right here. And what you want to do now, we want to check spark one more time. There is a ground wire right here. Okay, and I'm going to pull this one off and push it off to the side. And then I'm going to use my spark tester one more time, because if you have any problem between the ground wire all the way up into your electrical system, that you may have that problem. Basically, without this ground wire on the coil, this is just centralized, it's just the coil itself. It should have spark, and if it doesn't, we have a bad coil. I'm gonna go ahead and try this one more time on a spark tester. Okay, so we definitely have a bad coil. And we need to take this bolt here off and that bolt there, and they're usually 5/16. Okay, coil comes right off. We're gonna go ahead and get the new coil. The new coils do not look anything like the old coils, and I think it's just they're trying to cheapen things up. So this is the new coil here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the flywheel and find the magnets right here. And you can just use a screwdriver or something, right? There's your magnet. That's where we're going to do the armature air gap. Just going to clean it up a little bit. I've never had a magnet not work through rust, but while you're here, you might as well clean it up. Now I'm going to turn this off to the side so my coil won't connect to it. We don't want that to happen. Now this says here, this side out. Kind of, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it says this side out. It makes it pretty easy. You can't mess that up. So now you can see how there's a long oblong hole right there. So that's so you can slide it. So what I'll do is I'll get the bolt started, and then I'll pull this all the way back out as far as it'll go away from the flywheel. And I don't like to use my electric ratchet when I'm tightening these down, because this is just screwed into aluminum just like everything else, but I don't want to strip the threads. Very fine threaded screws, and you just hold the coil out while you tighten down your bolts. And I'm going to tighten them to where they're snug, so when the magnets come by, it's not going to get sucked into the magnet, because we want to use the plastic feeler or my plastic gauge. I'm going to go ahead and move the magnet around to the front where the coil is, and you just barely get both sides of the magnet on each side, right there on each leg. And then I'm going to put my plastic gauge right there, and I'm going to go ahead and loosen up one, loosen up the other, and that they will get drawn into the magnet like so. And then you tighten them back up again. And I just do these hand tight, but I do it very tight. You don't want to strip out the bolts, but you want to make sure they're tight. And then since my plastic gauge is still there, I'll just turn the flywheel, and normally it'll just pop right out like that. Okay, there it is. And then you have your air gap. Now you can't go all the way around, just to make sure that nothing's hitting. Okay, so once your coil is all together, do not forget to connect your ground wire back onto the ignition, or you will not be able to turn off your machine. Make sure that this wire also, this is the ground wire, make sure it's not pinched anywhere or it's frayed anywhere, because that'll also make it ground out. But we knew by taking it off that it actually didn't have sparks. So since it's apart right now, I'm going to go ahead and see if it'll fire up, and if it does, then we're good to go. We'll put it all back together again. And there you have it. Ignition coil is what the fix was. Okay, so now we know it runs. We're going to go ahead and put this housing back on. Now the housing, you have a couple points of this housing where one, this guy here, he has a little slice right here that you have to get the housing into. And if you look at your housing, it has a little slice right here, plastic part, that actually holds that steady. And also where the hole is here for your oil, it'll also have little slots. So when you put this over, it's like a little puzzle, but everything has to line up just right. And if it doesn't, it'll kind of look wrong too. Like your dipstick tube won't look right, and this will flap around. And then you have to line up this. Now make sure that your wire does not get pinched. I do like the fact that they put an extra layer of protection on the ignition coil, and it's a metal boot, which should help with the heat. And then you have push this down over your O-ring on your carburetor. Now then you can also do the hand test just to make sure that you're not rubbing anywhere before you tighten it up. Okay. And then these have collars on them, so when you tighten these up, these will actually seat in properly. Lock that in. Let's give it another shot just to make sure that everything's good. All right, so that's pretty much wraps it up for how to diagnose and install an ignition coil in a single cylinder Briggs and Stratton 17.5 horsepower. Now this covers a lot of single cylinder Briggs and Stratton engines. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, share my channel with your friends, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.